Welcome to Saturday's Notebook. I'm David Feldman. Every week I keep a running notebook of stories I think are too important to let slip through the cracks. Stories that didn't get the attention they deserved. Stories that got buried under whatever fresh outrage rolled in the next morning. This is the collection from my notebook, highlights from the past week that I think are worth a closer look. Maybe you missed them. Maybe you caught them and you want to sit with them again. Either way, that's what this is. Quick note before we start. This is not a live show. This is a watch party. I'm down in the chat room right now watching the premiere along with you. So say hi to me. When the premiere wraps up, I'll be in the comments section for 30 minutes. I'm going to pin a comment at the top of the comments section so you can ask your questions, and I'll get to who and what I can. And if you're showing up later in the week to watch this, no problem. I check the comments section all the time. So leave a question or a correction whenever you get here, and I'll find it. Okay, check out the website, davidfeldmanshow.com. I'm revamping it, and it's really my notebook. So check out davidfeldmanshow.com. Sit back, sit up, spit up, throw back, throw up, enjoy the show, something like that. The FBI has reportedly begun a criminal investigation into the journalist from Atlantic Magazine who broke the story about Kash Patel's problem with alcohol. Journalist Sarah Fitzpatrick is being investigated, reportedly, by the FBI, a division inside the FBI tasked with looking into internal threats to FBI employees. At first, the FBI denied this investigation is taking place, but from what I understand, they have now confirmed it. Kash Patel, because of her article, is also suing Atlantic Magazine for $250 million for defamation. Atlantic reporter Sarah Fitzpatrick, currently under investigation by the FBI, she wrote her article based on interviews with 24 sources inside the FBI. She detailed Patel's excessive drinking and long-term absences that are being blamed on his excessive drinking. The article stated that Patel is a raw nerve who comes in hungover, screams and yells. One day he came in apparently hungover and freaked out one afternoon when he came to work in the afternoon, tried to log on, couldn't open his computer, and immediately assumed he was fired. According to the article in Atlantic, that he filed a $250 million defamation lawsuit. Patel began screaming, "I've been fired by Trump." He began calling people on Capitol Hill, right-wing news organizations and think tanks. I've been fired. And according to this article, for several hours, nobody in Washington knew who was in charge of the FBI. The article also stated that Kash Patel's drinking has become so bad, one day they couldn't wake him. The FBI had to use tools from their SWAT team to pry open his door in order to wake him up because he was so hungover. According to the article in The Atlantic, Patel can be seen at a very exclusive club most nights in Washington, D.C. According to the article, insiders report that he is often inebriated, which is in direct violation of FBI protocols. Drinking is frowned upon. And in the FBI, public drunkenness for FBI employees, those are grounds for dismissal. The article also stated that Kash Patel can be seen in Las Vegas's Poodle Room on the weekends, also, according to multiple sources, not sober. And this is all from Atlantic reporter Sarah Fitzpatrick, who the FBI is investigating as a possible threat to Kash Patel. Well, yeah, anybody who tells the truth about Kash Patel is a threat to Kash Patel. Last month, the FBI began an investigation into the New York Times reporter who broke the story that Patel is using the FBI's private jet to shepherd his girlfriend to her singing engagement. She's a performer. And according to the article in the New York Times, local FBI field offices have been ordered to protect Kash Patel's girlfriend with their SWAT teams. If she's in a city, the SWAT teams are assigned to protect Kash Patel's girlfriend. The FBI began looking into whether the female reporter from the New York Times who wrote that story, whether she had violated any anti-stalking laws. And the FBI, before they dropped the investigation, the FBI said they were worried that the article had jeopardized the lives of both Kash Patel and his girlfriend. His girlfriend, who allegedly, reportedly, was found holding hands with another man inside a closet the night of the White House Correspondents' Dinner shooting. She went hiding in a closet. I wonder if it was Lindsey Graham. Maybe she ran into a closet and found Lindsey Graham. So this criminal probe is on, but it isn't stopping the Atlantic's reporter Sarah Fitzpatrick from reporting on Kash Patel's alleged problem with drunkenness. She came out with a story yesterday, the same day we found out about the criminal probe into her. She came out with a story about Patel's stash of bourbon with his name brandished across his bourbon. It's a bourbon he gives to special friends. Patel gives away a personalized branded bourbon. Gives it away for free. He signs those bottles, adding number 9 because he's the 9th FBI director, or he loves the White Album. I think it's because he's the 9th FBI director. Number 9. The branded bourbon bottles are from Woodford Reserve in Kentucky. And according to the reporting in Atlantic Magazine, Kash Patel brought his branded whiskey on board a Justice Department plane where he serves it and drinks it. He brought this whiskey to Milan during the February Olympics. That's where you all saw him chugging beer with the U.S. men's hockey team in Milan. Remember that picture? According to the Atlantic, Trump, who's a teetotaler, his older brother Fred died from alcohol. Trump was ready to fire Patel after he saw that picture of Kash Patel drinking, chugging beers in the men's hockey team locker room, which, according to the Atlantic, Patel left behind a bottle of his bourbon inside the Olympic hockey team's locker room. The FBI, as I said, has a zero tolerance for unauthorized alcohol on the job. Is there authorized? We authorize you to get drunk. And several agents telling Sarah Fitzpatrick from the Atlantic Magazine that when he gives them his personalized bottles of bourbon, they find it demoralizing. Some agents told the Atlantic Magazine they fear that if they don't enthusiastically accept a bottle of Patel's bourbon, they fear they will be forced to take a lie detector test to determine their loyalty to the director. That was in the Atlantic Magazine story that Patel is suing over. The article that was written a month ago that detailed Patel's paranoia and drinking, he reportedly administers snap polygraph tests on FBI employees to determine which agents are loyal to him. One of the questions is, have you ever said anything bad about Kash Patel? That's what they're strapping FBI agents to lie detector tests and saying, have you ever said anything bad about Kash Patel? According to yesterday's article in The Atlantic, Patel brought a case of his bourbon to, and that is one big bong, Patel brought a case of his bourbon to an FBI training facility in Quantico in March. That's when he invited UFC fighters, mixed martial arts fighters, to train FBI agents, according to the Atlantic magazine. A bottle of Patel's bourbon went missing, and according to the Atlantic, Patel completely freaked out, demanding to know who took it, and he threatened to prosecute whoever took my bourbon. Only the best. I think this is AI. Is that AI? I think it's AI. Is that yeah, that's AI. Or maybe it's Photoshop. Only the best. Only the best. Trump only hires the best. Pete Hegseth says, he said it early Tuesday morning, that his military has, quote, our military, this is what he said, we've established a powerful red, white, and blue dome over the Strait. Red, white, and blue. You mean the same color as that handkerchief you blow your nose into, Pete Hegseth? Mr. Patriot blows his nose into the American flag. Although he doesn't have the American flag for toilet paper. Instead, he'd rather wipe his ass with the Constitution. Secretary of State Marco Rubio held a press briefing late Tuesday afternoon. So we had Hegseth lying in the morning, and then around 3 o'clock, Marco Rubio came in for the afternoon lies. He warned that we can never allow Iran to control the Strait of Hormuz. Well, that wasn't a problem, D-bag, until you decided to bomb Iran. For what reason? So they wouldn't have a nuclear bomb that they said they didn't have, that they never have, that they gave up their nuclear weapons ambitions in 2003. We had a treaty in 2015, D-bag, that your boss tore up. So now it's about we can never allow Iran to control the Strait of Hormuz. You created this problem by bombing Iran. They don't have a nuclear weapons program. But, said Rubio today, they have the desire to have a nuclear weapons program. Hey, I do too. You going to attack me? Yeah, you probably are. They have a desire to build nuclear weapons. That's why they signed the nuclear arms treaty in 2015. That's how much they have a desire. Our own intelligence agencies told Donald Trump this year and last year that Iran abandoned its nuclear weapons program in 2003. You're an effing liar. Every country that is a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty is allowed to enrich uranium. You're just an effing D-bag. So now this is the new talking point. And I warned you about this over the weekend, that they're going to shift from we can't allow them to have nuclear weapons, which they don't have. Now they're shifting to something tangible. We can't allow Iran's control over Hormuz to become the new normal. That's what Rubio said today. And this is what's going to get the American people riled up and maybe support ground troops. Rubio said at the White House on Tuesday, under no circumstances can we ever allow Iranians to normalize the fact that they get to blow up commercial ships and put mines in the water, unquote. Well, it's economic terrorism, and there's no military solution to economic terrorism. There's only diplomacy. You know, like signing a treaty in 2015 that Obama did with Iran, that your boss tore up. And again, check the record, D-bag. Iran didn't mess with the inspectors until after Trump tore up the treaty. Iran said, Donald Trump tore up the treaty. There is no treaty, so we don't have to allow UN inspectors, and we're going to enrich uranium because there's no treaty anymore. You created this mess, Donald Trump. Rubio then defended Donald Trump's naval blockade, saying, and this is just verbal gymnastics, and they just expect your eyes to roll to the back of your head and not completely understand the logic here. So, Marco Rubio said the naval blockade is necessary in order for America to exert financial pressure on Iran. That's why we're doing this. That's why 40% of our Navy is outside Hormuz, blocking all ships from leaving if they are Iranian or if they're paying tribute money to the Iranians. And then he says, we must blockade Iran and bring them to their financial knees because a financial pressure is also being placed on the rest of the world because of Iran shutting down Hormuz. No ship can leave Hormuz, according to Donald Trump, if it makes a deal with Iran or is permitted to by Iran. And no ship can leave, actually, because it can't get insurance. And we don't have enough ships or money or weapons to sit in and around Hormuz to escort those ships in and out. He didn't say that. But this is what he said. The ease at which he lies, Marco Rubio, quote, nations from around the world, the overwhelming majority of whom are not even engaged in any military hostilities, are now at risk, not just of losing their cargo, but the lives of their own citizens because of this blockade, unquote. Whose blockade, D-bag? Whose blockade? Donald Trump's or Iran's? Iran said they would open up Hormuz over the weekend. They said, let's open up Hormuz and the naval blockade, and we'll talk. Iran said, we have 14 points that we want to go over with you. Let's talk for 30 days, but let's open up Hormuz. And Donald Trump said, no, you're humiliating me. That's what happened. I'll get to that in a second. People are in the sub-Saharan and in Asia, this country, are starving. Farmers are going out of business because Donald Trump can't get a deal with Iran that's 1/100th as good as the one Obama had in 2015. So there's no deal. This is who you're allowing to be our commander-in-chief. This is who holds our men and women's lives in his hands, our soldiers. He is willing to risk our soldiers because he tore up a deal with Iran, and now he knows he'll never get a deal as good as that. And he's just has no idea what to do other than what he does best, and that is bedlam, chaos, COVID. Remember COVID? 1 million people died in America. That's the largest number in the industrialized world per capita. And just in terms of sheer numbers, 1 million died because he didn't know how to deal with COVID. Chaos. Turned it into masks, freedom. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get respirators from New York to Texas. So let's turn this into whether or not people should be forced to wear masks. So Marco Rubio lies. He just lies. He said on Tuesday during his press briefing at the White House, he said, quote, many nations privately, some publicly, have asked the United States to help free their ships and to restore freedom of navigation to the Straits of Hormuz, since it is a critical artery of global trade. When asked to name which countries publicly, you said publicly and privately, which ones publicly? Couldn't come up with a name. Why? Because he's a liar. Nobody asks the U.S. to escort them out of the Persian Gulf. Every country said, don't do this. Don't do this. Make a deal with Iran. Don't do this. And then, so now this is the new talking point. Iran cannot have the power to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. No military solution to that. And then he says, quote, if Iran had a nuclear weapon and they decided to close the Strait of Hormuz and make our gas prices like $9 a gallon or $8 a gallon, we wouldn't be able to do anything about it because they have a nuclear weapon, unquote. They are able to close the Strait of Hormuz without a nuclear weapon, and there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing you can do about it militarily. You're the Secretary of State. That means you're supposed to negotiate treaties. You're the lead diplomat. You're not supposed to be advocating for war, for seizing Hormuz. I mean, it's just incredible what he says here. If Iran had a nuclear weapon and then they decided to close the Strait of Hormuz, we wouldn't be able to do anything about it. You can't do anything about it now. We've been over the Strait of Hormuz. They've been planning this since 1979. They've carved bunkers into the sides of mountains, mobile missiles. It's estimated that at least half of their missiles are still intact. Yeah, we can do a lot of damage to Iran. We've proven that. But they're in it for the long haul. How many Americans are going to want to risk their son, their daughter, their father, their mother, because Donald Trump tore up the 2015 deal with Iran? They want you afraid that Iran's going to get a nuclear weapon. Fox News trashed the deal that Obama made with Iran in 2015. It was a perfect deal. That's why the EU signed it. That's why Germany, France, Great Britain, the entire EU, Russia, China, they all signed it. It was a perfect deal. But anything Obama does can't be good. That deal is rooted in the nuclear non-proliferation. If you stick with me on this, I promise you will see why the deal that Obama struck was perfect and why Trump is just lying. He just wants a war. He doesn't know what he wants. But let me explain to you what the law and the treaties are, okay? The Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty was signed back in 1970. 190 countries signed it, including Iran. And they all agreed to enrich uranium for peaceful purposes, not to develop nuclear weapons. Iran signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, 1970. And that was the basis of the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, that they would be allowed to enrich uranium for peaceful purposes. 2% purity, 3% purity. They got up to 60%. Why? Because Trump pulled out of this deal. Okay. Again, this Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty is the pillar upon which Iran states it is legally permitted to enrich uranium for what? Medical, industrial, or energy uses. Countries all over the world have nuclear power plants, which I'm not thrilled about, but they enrich uranium for other things without making it weapons grade. It's important to know this, and it's a little deep in the weeds, so I thought, all right, save it to the last, you're 8 hours into the show, David, if anybody's still listening after 8 hours. But this is the important stuff. This is really important. There are 9 countries on this planet that have nuclear weapons. And you got to pay attention to this, because if you know this, you will know how evil Donald Trump and the Republicans are, and Benjamin Netanyahu. Okay? There are 9 countries on the planet that have nuclear weapons, and there they are. Okay? Before the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty was signed in 1970, the United States, China, Russia, France, and Great Britain were the only countries that had nuclear bombs. And Israel. Israel got a nuclear bomb in 1967, but diplomatically, they never introduced themselves as a nuclear power. You have to introduce yourself and declare yourself a nuclear power. Israel never did that. So it's not a party to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. It was one of the countries that didn't sign the Non-Proliferation Treaty in 1970. Now, I want you to think about this, okay? And this is the core of what it's all about. And if you understand this, you understand everything. The entire world knows Israel has a nuclear bomb. And the latest premise for the war on Iran is the same premise it was for the war with Iraq. We cannot allow a rogue nation to develop a nuclear bomb. That's one of the chief reasons, one of the chief lies that led us into the war in Iraq and now the war in Iran. You keep hearing it over and over again. We cannot allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. And now I'm going to explain to you why this is so stupid. Forget that Iran abandoned their nuclear weapons program in 2003. Forget that our own intelligence agencies have been telling that to Trump since he returned to office. Okay? Iran is legally permitted to enrich uranium. Countries that they signed the nuclear non-proliferation agreement, I think 160, 190 countries signed. You sign that treaty and you're allowed to enrich uranium, 2% purity, 3% purity. Does Iran enrich to 60%? Is it enriching uranium closer to weapons grade than any other country that is a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty? We believe so. Grassi, the UN inspector, who I trust, believes so. Why do they do that? It's to make Iran look more threatening on the world stage when it comes to their military, what they can do to protect themselves. But we've since learned they don't need nuclear weapons. They can just shut down Hormuz. So the lie, and I want you to think about this, the lie that Donald Trump is hammering home to the American people is, be scared. We cannot allow Iran to develop a nuclear weapon. Same thing with Iraq, 2003, and the lead up to that illegal war. Cannot allow Saddam Hussein to have a nuclear weapon. Pete Hegseth constantly, throughout his testimony last week, dodged questions on what the war would cost by rhetorically asking, how much are you willing to pay to keep a nuclear weapon out of the hands of Iran? That's a frightening, it sounds good if you don't follow this stuff. If you don't understand nuclear weapons, which I don't, if you don't understand nuclear war, which I don't, if you don't understand geography, which I don't, I know most Americans don't, then you're easily scared. You're easily convinced that the most dangerous thing on the planet is Iran, or in 2003, Iraq getting a nuclear weapon. And what is the foundation of this lie? Where do they get this from? It's predicated on all of us thinking about North Korea. That's the backbone of this lie, that North Korea got hands on a nuclear weapon and now it became uninvadable. That's the lie, that once a country gets a nuclear bomb, you cannot invade it. North Korea became a nuclear power in 2006. It had been a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, but it pulled out in 2003 and then publicly introduced itself as a nuclear power. They said, we have a nuclear weapon in 2006. And the Trump administration and Netanyahu said, see, we allowed them to get a nuclear weapon, and that makes North Korea attack-proof. They can do whatever they want now, and there's nothing we can do about it because they have a nuclear bomb. And people believe that. People have now been convinced, because if you repeat the lie, Netanyahu stood at the General Assembly with maps. If you repeat this lie, people believe it. Once a country has a nuclear bomb, they never have to worry about getting attacked. So we fight wars to make sure they don't get a nuclear bomb. Well, because of that lie, Iran enriched uranium to 60%. You need, what does it have to be, 98% purity for it to be weapons grade? They were bringing it up to about 60%. Why did they do that? For the same reason Saddam Hussein, in the lead up to the invasion of Iraq in 2003, he messed with UN weapons inspector. He didn't have a nuclear weapons program. He didn't have the scientists that Iran has. But he wanted people to believe he did, especially Iran. Saddam Hussein wanted Iran to think he had a nuclear weapons program because Iran and Iraq engaged in one of the longest and deadliest wars of the 20th century. It was between 1980 and 1988. It was one of the bloodiest wars. Anywhere between 500,000 to 1 million people died. We were giving weapons to Iraq, and that war ended the way all wars end, in a stalemate with close to 1 million people dead and nothing accomplished. That's how all wars end, except World War II and maybe the Civil War. But looks like with the Supreme Court's latest ruling, that Civil War might have been a stalemate. So Saddam Hussein, leader of Iraq, led that country throughout that entire war. He started that war. He wanted Iran, he wanted Israel, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait to think he was not to be messed with. So he messed with the UN inspectors. In the lead up to the illegal invasion of Iraq, which was in 2003, he wanted George Bush not to be certain what Saddam Hussein had. So our soldiers were fitted with hazmat suits when they went in. We didn't know what he was holding. Well, that's the deterrent of either having a nuclear bomb or making people think you have one. But it didn't stop George Bush from invading Iraq. George Bush lied and said Hussein had either a nuclear bomb or weapons of mass destruction. And he knew he was lying, but he wasn't sure about the weapons of mass destruction. But he invaded anyway. He said, for those of you who want evidence that Saddam Hussein has a nuclear bomb, I refuse to provide the smoking gun as proof through a mushroom cloud. That's what Bush said. That's what Condi Rice said, that we can't wait for a mushroom cloud to say, see, they have a nuclear bomb. And then all of you are going to say, why didn't we invade? And enough people bought into this, but he didn't have a nuclear bomb. Trump selling the same lie, but with Iran. We can't allow Iran to develop a nuclear bomb because then we can't invade them. That's the lie. Can't invade North Korea. Can't fight Russia. Can't fight China. They have nuclear weapons. Can't fight them. The world would come to an end. That's how these two wars, Iran and Iraq, were sold. Once a country has a nuclear weapon, they become untouchable. Okay, I took a little too long explaining the premise. I apologize. I'm going to poke the holes in it. Here we go. Anybody still here? India and Pakistan are nuclear powers, and they hate each other, thanks to Lord Mountbatten separating Hindus from the Muslims after the war. So India and Pakistan never signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. In 1974, India developed a nuclear weapon. It now has 180 nuclear warheads, we think. Pakistan, its neighbor, they're always fighting over Kashmir, they developed their nuclear weapon in 1998. And Pakistan has slightly fewer nuclear warheads. So, since 1998, since Pakistan became one of the 9 nuclear powers, since it became uninvadable, right? Pakistan has a nuclear bomb. You can't attack it, right? Since 1998, India and Pakistan, both nuclear powers, have fought 3 major wars, mostly over Kashmir. 3 major wars, 2 nuclear powers fighting each other 3 major wars, and literally tens of thousands of skirmishes over the course of close to 30 years. Both nuclear powers, but they still get to enjoy their wars. Israel has had a nuclear bomb since 1967. Didn't tell anyone, but everyone knew. Israel didn't have to tell anybody it had a nuclear bomb. The world knew. So Israel has a nuclear bomb. That makes Israel uninvadable, right? Unattackable. Since 1967, Israel has fought at least 8 to 10 major wars. It's also been attacked. It's attacked 10 times about. And then there's stuff that gets ignored. Right now, Israel, a nuclear power, right? Can't attack a country with a nuclear power, with a nuclear bomb. Right now, it's being attacked by Iran, not a nuclear power. It's being attacked by Hezbollah in Lebanon, not a nuclear power. The Houthis in Yemen keep firing missiles into Israel. Houthis in Yemen, not a nuclear power. Hamas keeps attacking Israel. Hamas, not a nuclear power. But what if Hamas in Gaza got their hands on a nuclear weapon? Yes, they would drop it on Jerusalem, and everybody in the West Bank and Gaza would die. If Iran dropped a nuclear bomb on Israel, 20% of Israel, excluding Gaza, the Golan Heights, and the West Bank, 20% of Israel is Arab. A lot of Muslims there. I know the Iranians are Persian, they're not Arabs, but they're Muslim. You drop a bomb on Israel, you're not just going to wipe out all the Jews living there, you're going to wipe out 20% of the population that's Arab, and that radioactivity will spread to the West Bank and wipe out all the Palestinians. It'll spread to Gaza, kill all the Palestinians there. It'll spread north to Lebanon and kill Hezbollah and the Shia Muslims in southern Lebanon. As my daughter said, well, I don't want to quote her. It's kind of like, well, I won't. It's her line. I don't want to steal it from her. But it's like getting into an elevator with 3 people and detonating a landmine. Yeah, you're going to kill everybody in the elevator, including you. So, yeah, it's a scary world because of nuclear weapons. It would be great if we didn't have nuclear weapons. And yes, there's this fear of a madman like Donald Trump with his hand on the button. But you drop a bomb on Israel, you kill Muslims. How did Israel, having a nuclear bomb, keep it from being attacked? It's been attacked. Egypt attacked it, knowing they had a bomb. Syria, Jordan, Iran, Lebanon. Some of you are going to say that Israel attacked first. Maybe. That's for discussion. Preemptive, preventative war. The point is, Israel has had a nuclear bomb since 1967, and they were able to fight wars with Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Iran, Lebanon, and none of them said, ooh, they've got a nuclear bomb, we better not do this. The United Kingdom has a nuclear bomb. Didn't stop Argentina from seizing the Falklands. And by the way, Trump is now telling Argentina that we would support you if you took back the Falklands because Great Britain isn't helping me in the Persian Gulf. Ukraine gave up all its nuclear weapons after the fall of the Soviet Union. Ukraine had a lot of nuclear weapons. And one of the deals, they agreed to give up their nuclear weapons because Clinton said, we'll protect you. You don't need nuclear weapons. Ukraine was invaded by Russia in February of 2022. Russia has close to 5,500 nuclear warheads. Ukraine, 0. So, after Ukraine was invaded by Russia, most of us thought, well, since Russia is a nuclear power, Ukraine is only going to try to push Russia back to Russia. Just push them out of Ukraine. But since Russia is a nuclear power and nuclear powers are unattackable, Ukraine would never dream of firing drones and missiles into Russia. They're a nuclear power. You can't attack a nuclear power. They have 5,500 nuclear warheads. It makes them impenetrable. So says the lie, the myth. March 11th, 2025, record-breaking drone assault on Moscow by Ukraine. 3 killed, at least 17 injured. 4 airports had to be shut down. Not since World War II has Moscow been attacked. March 14th, that was 2025, March 14th through the 17th of this year, perhaps Ukraine's largest drone attack since the invasion, swarms of drones. Russia claims it shot down 500. It lasted several days. Moscow's airport had to be shut down. Massive disruption. People had to stay inside. I don't believe anybody died. But Moscow is impenetrable. It has more than 5,500 nuclear warheads. Ukraine has 0. You can't attack a country that has 5,500 nuclear warheads. They're impenetrable. Apparently not. In February and March of this year, Ukraine doesn't have a nuclear bomb, somehow fired cruise missiles into Russia, hit defense factories and refineries. Russia has been attacked. Moscow has been attacked multiple times since the invasion by Ukraine. The nuclear weapons that Russia has did not keep Ukraine from attacking Russia the same way our nuclear weapons didn't keep Osama bin Laden from attacking the World Center and our Pentagon. So no, of course I don't want Iran to get a nuclear weapon. Of course not. But apparently bombing its nuclear facilities last June and then dropping 13,000 American bombs in about 4 weeks this year, in addition to the thousands of bombs that Israel has been dropping, apparently that's not going to stop Iran from enriching uranium. Well, what do you do? We're out of bombs. What do you do? Now, again, Iran says it has a right to enrich uranium. It does. It signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which gives you the right to enrich uranium. And it doesn't have a nuclear weapons program. On July 14th, 2015, in Vienna, Iran signed the Iran nuclear deal. It was signed by the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Russia, China, and Germany, and the European Union. They all signed it. And the agreement was Iran would abide by the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and enrich uranium for peaceful purposes. They signed it. And in return, we unfroze some assets. But Benjamin Netanyahu didn't like that because Iran supports Hezbollah in Lebanon. So he's got to scare the Israelis and the American people, convincing them that Iran must never have a nuclear weapon. Well, they don't. They gave up their nuclear weapons program in 2003, and they signed this Iran nuclear deal in 2015. But then Donald Trump became president. And what did he do? In May of 2018, he became president in January of 2017. In May of 2018, the genius Donald Trump pulls out of the treaty and effectively killed it. He killed the treaty. And by 2019, 1 year after that, Iran began playing games with weapons inspectors. Google this. The deal was signed in 2015. Between 2015 and 2019, Iran was fully compliant with UN inspectors. Trump pulls out of the treaty in 2018. By 2020, Iran starts messing with UN inspectors. Suddenly Iran says, there's no treaty. What gives you the right to inspect us? Trump killed it. We agreed to snap inspections at the last minute to allow Grassi from the UN in. But there's no treaty. So why should we allow you in? We had agreed. So who turned Iran into a problematic state that's enriching uranium up to 60%? Who did it? Who did it? We had a treaty. We had a deal. We unfroze some of Iran's assets, which Fox News and Trump, why would we do that? They're our mortal enemy. Well, they now are still your mortal enemy, and they closed Hormuz. And there's really nothing you can do to stop them from building a nuclear bomb. There's really, you can't bomb somebody to stop a bomb. So again, they were compliant with the treaty. They were enriching uranium. They were allowing in inspectors. They were playing some games, but Trump pulls out in 2018. By 2020, Iran says there's no treaty. We don't like the UN inspectors being here. Who caused this? You know, the world is a very complicated place with a lot of nuance, and it's really hard to find a scapegoat, to pin the blame on one country or one person. But I can assure you, all you need to do is look back at recent history, and you would quickly realize that one man is to blame for all of this: Donald Trump. And eventually, America, we're going to be to blame for this. Eventually, you have to start blaming the American people. It's time to start wondering if Trump may not be the stupidest person in America. Maybe Americans are the stupidest people on the planet. That may be the problem, that Americans are the stupidest people on the planet, and we would have to be the stupidest people on the planet. We're going to spend $1.5 trillion next year on the Pentagon, but if we want to fight a war, we also have to spend $200 billion on a war supplemental, and that will only cover a couple of months. And those wars and those enemies, the enemies don't exist. We have to invent them. We have to pull out of a treaty with Iran to get a war going to justify $1.5 trillion on weapons. You would have to be the stupidest people on the planet, America, to go without food, health care, to live with filthy water, a crumbling infrastructure, schools that can't educate, just so you could keep feeding this war machine. You would have to be the stupidest people on the planet to allow this to happen. And I'm also going to talk about Samuel Alito, Justice Samuel Alito, gutting Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and how he's handing Trump and Mike Johnson most of the tools they need to steal the 2026 midterms. This is a legal coup. This is how Hitler took power. Hitler never broke the law. So Sam Alito is helping Mike Johnson and Donald Trump steal at least the House of Representatives. It's the same Alito who wrote the decision overturning Roe v. Wade. It's the same Alito whose wife flew her flag upside down in the week leading up to Joe Biden's inauguration. Alito was asked about this, and he said, I can't control my wife. So you'll control every woman's body other than your wife. You overturn Roe because you can't control your wife, who thinks Joe Biden is an illegitimate or was an illegitimate president. The court helped Trump in 2024 by delaying the immunity ruling until the very last minute. And now they're helping Trump by sowing chaos, reversing Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, and then speeding up the dissolution of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. We were waiting on the Calais decision. I don't know how it's pronounced. I don't watch television. I'm going to assume it's pronounced Calais. We were waiting on the Calais decision, but nobody thought it would have that big an effect, if any, on the 2026 midterms because it's so late in the calendar. We all thought this was going to affect future congressional races, but Samuel Alito, whose wife flew the American flag upside down after January 6th in the lead up to Joe Biden's inauguration, Sam Alito wrote the decision. And now he's saying, he wrote the decision gutting Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, and now he's saying we can't wait. We have to break up majority-minority congressional districts now. And this week, he and the courts sped up the process in Louisiana to gut an all-black congressional district this week while elections are already taking place. Early voting began in Louisiana. Mass confusion. The speed at which this court works when it wants to is positively fascistic. What this court is setting the stage for is the bedlam Donald Trump needs going into and after the 2026 midterms. Donald Trump's approval rating is at record lows. All the polling shows Americans hate him. They hate his war, and they hate Republicans. But he can't lose the House of Representatives. If he does, he's in a lot of trouble. The court has just given him the chaos he needs to challenge the results in November, so he can probably find one more reason to invoke the Insurrection Act. The gerrymandering wars are now going into hyperdrive, which means it's conceivable a lot of congressional districts will be challenged in the lead up to the midterms and after, meaning Donald Trump will be able to use what most Americans don't understand, gerrymandering. He'll use that in order to sow more confusion and create another January 6th, this time on January 3rd, 2027, when the new Congress is supposed to be sworn in. And most people are expecting something along the lines of a blue wave. It's what Trump has to do. He's got to challenge the results. And Samuel Alito, by gutting the Voting Rights Act, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, just handed Trump the tools to create a January 6th on January 3rd. He can't leave the White House. He knows that. That's what the ballroom is all about. Trump is about to turn 80. He plans to age in place inside the White House like a good octogenarian. He doesn't want to go into a home. He's going to stay put inside the White House, especially since he can't leave. Once he's no longer president, Donald Trump knows that he will spend the rest of his life in criminal and civil court. Here is Donald Trump talking to small business owners yesterday, although, since the war, everybody's a small business owner if you run a business. But this is Donald Trump. Always starts off as a joke. It was a joke that he was going to change it to the Trump Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. It was a joke. People laughed at it.
When I get out of office in, let's say, 8 or 9 years from now, I'll be able to use it. I'll be able to use it myself.
He hears the applause. He looks to somebody. He's not leaving. He's not leaving. You think Lindsey Graham is going to stop him? You think Mike Johnson is going to stop him? The only thing that's going to stop him is a massive landslide in November. Again, this broke with standard procedure, a 20-year principle, the Purcell principle. And they fast-tracked the new map. While the primaries, people are voting in the Louisiana primaries right now. Early voting began. It used to be standard procedure for the Supreme Court to wait at least more than a month before they would certify a new map. Louisiana officially suspended its congressional primary elections. They're ongoing. The decision came down. They have a new map that is being fast-tracked by this Supreme Court. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, who was appointed by Biden, she wrote a dissent on the fast track, warning that the court's decision is, quote, spawning chaos in Louisiana. Well, that's what Trump wants. Chaos. She pointed out that ballots have already been sent to voters. Early voting, voters have filled out those ballots and sent them in. And Judge Alito issued his ruling in the middle of an election. And now they're saying, cancel the election. The Supreme Court's Louisiana decision just is in direct violation of the Supreme Court's 20-year rule that you don't change election rules or maps in the middle of election season. But Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito said we must fast track Louisiana's new map. He wrote, quote, the need for prompt action by this court is clear. Prompt action. The need for prompt action is clear. So the wheels of justice here in the United States move slowly. Unless black people are about to vote and there's a way we can stop that, then we have to speed it up. Well, black people are allowed to vote. They're just not allowed to be represented. Their voting power is being diluted. So the wheels of justice move slowly unless we have an opportunity here to dilute black representation in Congress and solidify Republican power. Wheels of justice move slowly, except for then, and it moves really slowly for Donald Trump, so he can't be tried before the 2024 election for inciting an insurrection and violating the Espionage Act. We'll slow down the wheels of justice until the very last minute. I think they came down with the immunity ruling on July 1st, 2024. That was like the last day they could issue a ruling which said, go back, let's see new indictments, let's parse out what was an official act as president and what wasn't an official act. Donald Trump should have been on trial. Had that immunity ruling come down as early as the one that said Colorado can't throw him off the ballot, that, for inciting an insurrection, they couldn't wait to come out with that ruling in 2024. Oh, no, Colorado has to keep him on the ballot. He didn't incite an insurrection. But when they were fast with that, and they took their sweet time on the immunity ruling because they know he's a criminal. So they figured if we wait till the last minute and then ask for new superseding indictments that are in line with our ruling, he won't be tried before the election. But you know what? Even if he were tried and convicted, the American people are so stupid he would have won anyway. California is the largest economy in the United States. Nobody comes close to California. The U.S. economy is about $31 trillion a year. California's is $4.2 trillion. That's about 14% of the total U.S. economy. Texas comes in second with $2.9 trillion, not even close to California. And globally, well, the United States is still the largest economy, $32 trillion. China comes in second, 20 million, not even close. We're still bigger than China. Germany comes in third, $5 trillion economy. And California is slightly ahead of Japan. California is in fourth place. So California's governor's race. California is an enormous state, very important. And early voting in California's governor's race began this week. The election is June 2nd. Although it's a primary, we could have an idea of who the governor is going to be at the end of the night on June 2nd. So it's a primary. It's a jungle primary, meaning Republicans and Democrats are all on the same ballot. You just vote. And the top two candidates, regardless of party, end up on the ballot in November. It's conceivable two Democrats could be running against each other, or two Republicans. The hope for Republicans right now is that Democrats split the vote in California so that one Republican can make it to number two. So all eyes are on California. The big debates were this week. Everybody's looking at California, especially since the current governor is Gavin Newsom. He's term limited out of office. So I think it's January 1st, 2027, he's gone. And he starts his presidential campaign on November 4th of this year, the day after the midterms. He's got a great national profile. He's a great politician. As governor of California, he was reelected, and he survived that recall election in September of 2021. He got 61% of the vote in the recall. Gray Davis, you might remember, I think that was 2004. Yeah, I think it was 2004. He didn't survive that recall, and we ended up with Arnold. Last November, Prop 50 was Gavin Newsom's Election Rigging Response Act, which created 5 reliably blue congressional seats to cancel out Texas, which had just carved out 5 reliably red congressional seats. That passed with close to 65% of the vote. That's a landslide, and that was Gavin Newsom. His approval rating among California voters hovers around 50%, so he's above water, but he's not the most popular governor in America. He's also not the least popular. That's Joni Ernst, the Republican. No, not Davis. Damn it, the governor of Iowa is the least popular governor, and I can't remember her name. But he's a little above average for a blue state governor. He's running for president, and there are a couple of problems regarding Newsom. He looks good. Well, he looks good. He looks good on paper, but he is a product of the San Francisco Pelosi machine and the Getty family. Oil, the Gettys were behind and are behind him. He was the mayor of San Francisco before he became governor of California. That means he's great on social issues, great on identity issues, but not so great on income inequality. He opposes this wealth tax that's on the ballot in California in November. And the idea of taxing wealth is gaining momentum throughout blue states. Now, there's a difference between taxing wealth and taxing income. Wealth is you're worth $5 billion. We're going to tax it. Income is you earn $1 million a year, and we're going to tax you more than we tax people who make $60,000 a year. It's called a progressive taxation, and we had that during the Eisenhower years. So on the California ballot in November is the 2026 billionaire tax cut. I'm sorry, it's the 2026 Billionaire Tax Act. One big, beautiful bill was the 2026 billionaire tax cut. That's what they should have called it. But the California ballot in November will have the 2026 Billionaire Tax Act, and it would be a one-time 5% tax on the net worth of any individual who has more than $1 billion. Newsom opposes this. So it is a remarkable referendum. It's taxing wealth. Again, not income. It's saying if you are worth more than $1 billion on paper, the state of California is taking 5% of that one time. It's a one-time surcharge. Former Congresswoman Katie Porter, she has been on this show. She is running for governor of California. You might have seen her during the debates. And she made a name for herself in Congress as the Elizabeth Warren of the House of Representatives. You had Elizabeth Warren in the Senate and Katie Porter in the House of Representatives representing Orange County. She was a student of Elizabeth Warren's when she attended Harvard Law. She became Elizabeth Warren's protege, but she left Congress to run for the Senate and was beaten by Adam Schiff. Now she's running for California governor. She's not polling too well. She's in the single digits. There was video of her belittling an employee, and because she's a woman, she's not allowed to do that. So she's in the single digits. Not good. She, who is a champion of the working class and the poor, she opposes the one-time 5% wealth tax. She says it's a bad idea because she says it's a temporary fix. She said California, for the long term, has to tax high-income earners at a higher rate year after year, not go after their net worth once, which she warned will drive rich people out of the state. Personally, I am all about driving rich people out of the country. I really am. I'll go over why we don't need rich people later on in the show. When they say, we're going to take our ball and go elsewhere, good, leave, get out. Tom Steyer is the billionaire candidate for governor of California. He's polling at about 12%, and he supports the wealth tax. Xavier Becerra is polling better than Steyer in some polls. We don't know. Sometimes Becerra is the front runner. Sometimes he's not. Some say it could be Steyer. Becerra agrees with Katie Porter. He thinks a one-time tax on billionaires won't do it. Steyer, the billionaire, is attempting to paint himself as the most progressive of all the candidates for governor. He supports the wealth tax. He wants to abolish ICE, which you can't really do in California. It's a federal agency, but he wants to make it impossible for state and local law enforcement to cooperate in any way with ICE. And he is now for Medicare for all and a state-run single-payer health care system, a little different from his presidential run in 2020. He issued a statement recently saying, I was wrong in 2020. Bernie was right. I now support single payer. Gavin Newsom, as governor, ran for re-election saying he supported single payer, and then when the bills came to his desk, he wasn't for single payer. So Gavin Newsom, if you don't follow California politics too closely, he seems great. He's not as progressive and to the left as some of us want him to be. Could he beat Trump, who is running again? Maybe. Here in New York City, Zoran Mamdani is our new mayor. He became a U.S. citizen, I believe, in 2019. He was born in Uganda. He's been in office, let me repeat that. I think it was 2019. Zoran Mamdani became a U.S. citizen in 2019. In less than a decade, he became the mayor of New York City. He's been in office for slightly more than 100 days and has been consistent in going after the billionaires. We have too many in New York City, and he's demanding, not asking, demanding they pay their fair share. Yesterday, he announced a $31 million legal judgment against two of the largest landlords in the Bronx. They've been treating their tenants like crap, as most landlords do. Mold, leaks, rodents, roaches, collapsing ceilings and walls, unsafe wiring. Sounds like the Doral in Miami, owned by Donald Trump. No heat, no hot water. So they got the broken elevators. He's cracking down on these landlords, and it will help about 500 families who live in these two apartment complexes. They're Fordham Towers and Robert Fulton Terrace. So what do you care about 500 families who live in Fordham Towers and Robert Fulton Terrace? you should be caring a lot. This is monumental. New York City under Zoran Mamdani froze $900,000 of the assets belonging to the two landlords, and then they took it out after they got the legal judgment yesterday. They took it out of their bank accounts and are now using that money to perform immediate repairs on those two apartment complexes. They have a chief restructuring officer who was appointed by Mamdani to make sure the $900,000 that they took from the landlords is going to repair the buildings. So Fannie Mae is foreclosing on these two buildings. The landlords defaulted on $61 million worth of mortgages. Like all landlords, they made a bad bet. They take it out. And these are, I don't know if they're slumlords. They turned it into a slum. They made a bad bet, and they make their tenants pay for it. Yes, these landlords compared to the Kushner family are small potatoes. But by doing this, Zoran Mamdani is putting other landlords in New York City on notice. Clean up your apartment complexes or you're next. That's called putting heads on sticks. You want a piece of this? You put somebody's head on a stick, a slumlord, you're the mayor, you put his head on a stick, figuratively, and say, anybody else want to mess with the working class and the poor? You can't prosecute every slumlord in New York City, so you pick high-profile cases. It's firing a warning shot to other landlords. You could be next. It's called making an example of someone. It's why you prosecute our defense chief, Pete Hegseth, under the War Crimes Act of 1996. You set an example. You figuratively put a head on a stick. Because by every definition of the War Crimes Act of 1996, signed by President Clinton, which this enshrined into American law the punishments for violating the Geneva Conventions of 1949. There are now strictly defined punishments as of the War Crimes Act of 1996. If you kill or give an order to kill non-combatants on a boat, when you kill or give an order to kill survivors of an airstrike, as Pete Hegseth does, that is punishable if you kill more than one person. According to the War Crimes Act of 1996, that is punishable by execution. I don't support capital punishment, so I don't want him to be executed. I just want him locked away for life. I'm all about law and order. And there's no statute of limitations on the War Crimes Act of 1996. You cannot prosecute every war criminal lurking inside Trump's Pentagon right now. There are way too many. And, the lawyers in the Pentagon who are allowing these war crimes to happen, that makes them war criminals, especially since they know what the law is. The generals who follow these orders, war criminals. Well, you can't prosecute the entire Pentagon. So you set an example. You figuratively put a head on a stick by arresting Pete Hegseth. In other words, figuratively, don't want any harm to come to him. That's the difference between me and Pete Hegseth. I don't believe in violence. I don't get off on violence. What you do, and that's what Zoran Mamdani did with this judgment against the two landlords, is you go after some low-hanging, obvious fruit, the criminal with the most name recognition, and you use them as examples. This is what happens when you violate the Geneva Conventions. This is what happens when you violate the War Crimes Act of 1996 and our Constitution. We lock up Pete Hegseth, a few generals, a few lawyers inside the Pentagon, and we tell future generations of defense chiefs and their lawyers, you want to end up like Pete Hegseth? It's why so many people went to jail After Watergate, John Mitchell, Nixon's attorney general, went to jail after Watergate. Heads on a stick, set an example. Mamdani is doing just that. If you're a landlord, you treat the people who pay your rent with dignity, you give them what they pay for, or you will pay for not giving them what they pay for. This is democratic socialism in action, and this is a success story. This is working families finally having an advocate inside City Hall. Yes, I love Zoran Mamdani. The way hedge fund managing works is you get people to give you money because you can convince them, I'm a Harvard genius and I have a crystal ball and can predict the future, which nobody can. But people always like to think they're getting the inside track. This guy, Ken Griffin, he's really smart. He went to Harvard. So he convinces these douchebags and they give him their money. And we're talking about hedge fund managers like Ken Griffin who take money from college endowments, insurance companies that need to invest, pension funds, unions. They go, oh, Ken Griffin, he'll invest this wisely. Well, he takes 2% off the top, plus a 20% management fee, and then the transaction fees. So there's it's estimated these kind of funds, 5%. 5% of what you're paying this genius, his ability to predict the future. You give him $100, right off the top, you got $95. But he's convinced unions, pension funds, endowments to invest in Citadel. As Bernie Sanders famously says, the business model of Wall Street is fraud. So there is the stock market, and you can buy the actual market. It's called an index fund. And an index fund mimics what are called the indexes. The S&P 500 is an index. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is an index. When they say the NASDAQ is up today, the NASDAQ is an index. It's a basket of stocks used to measure the direction of the stock market. And you can buy those actual baskets of stock. John Bogle from Vanguard invented this, I think in the 70s. And they're called index funds. You buy mutual funds that mimic these indexes. You buy a mutual fund that is called the S&P index, or a mutual fund that's called the NASDAQ index, or the Dow Jones index. That way, if you're stupid enough to play the stock market, you don't have to check your portfolio. Just when you hear on the news, the Dow Jones is up 300 points today, that means you're up. Dow Jones Industrial Averages are down, you're down. It is said that had Donald Trump just taken his inheritance and not become a real estate tycoon who had to declare bankruptcy 6 times that we know of, said if he had just put it in an index fund when he got it from his father and probably stole it from his sisters and brothers, he'd be worth billions and billions of dollars, but he had to be a big guy. He had to be a builder in Manhattan, not a quiet investor. And he lost it all. He lost everything his father gave him. So nobody can outperform the indexes. It's impossible. But there's a multi-trillion-dollar industry of charlatans claiming they can pick the right stocks. And they can't, but there are a lot of stupid people out there. Warren Buffett is not stupid. He's considered the greatest investor ever. And if you ask him, where should I put my money? He will say, don't give it to me. Put it in an index fund. Now, Berkshire Hathaway, he just quit, or he just retired. I think he's in his 90s. Berkshire Hathaway, over the long haul, outperforms the indexes. And so does Citadel, by the way. Ken Griffin, if you're parking your money for 30 years, you're probably better off giving your money to Citadel. But Warren Buffett isn't outperforming the indexes this year, and neither is Ken Griffin. For a long time, he's been underperforming the index funds. In 4 out of the past 5 years, Ken Griffin has underperformed the market by double digits. For example, so this is an example, but he says, I'm a job creator. You're a job destroyer and a wealth destroyer, Ken Griffin. In the past 5 years, you destroyed people's wealth. The S&P index was up more than 16% in 2025. Ken Griffin was up 10%. Didn't keep up with the market, beat inflation. S&P up 27% in 2024. Ken Griffin's fund was up 15%. Same numbers for 2023. 15% for Citadel, 28%, I think, for the S&P. In 2022, he outperformed the S&P 500. He did great in 2022, but he gave it all back in 2023, 24, and 2025. This year, the S&P index is up 8%. He's up 2.4%. That's pretty bad. That's called destroying wealth. Maybe over the long haul, if you can sit on the investment, he'll outperform the indexes. But for the past 5 years and this year, wealth destroyer and a job destroyer. And the people who work for him, those 3,000 people who live, or they don't even live in New York City, you know that. The jobs he create, they suck money out of the economy. They are the takers, not the givers. And as Zoran Mamdani, our mayor, pointed out on April 15th, they live in New York City, at least the billionaires do, but they claim to live in Miami so they can pay 0 state and local taxes. You know, like Donald Trump. That's Saturday's Notebook for this week. Thank you for watching. Head to the comments section right now, and I'll be down there for the next half hour with a pinned comment up at top so we can talk. If you're catching this later in the week, leave a note anyway or a correction. I'll get to it. I always read your comments. Check out davidfeldmanshow.com. We're revamping my website. See you Sunday at 6:05 live for the live stream. Good night.